I never imagined the first time I'd be called a fat pig in public would be inside a courtroom, under the cold brightness of fluorescent lights, in front of my husband of 26 years, 2 attorneys, a dozen strangers, and the judge who would decide the end of our marriage. But life has a way of revealing a person's true character at the precise moment you wish it wouldn't. "Look at her," my stepdaughter Camille shouted, pointing at me with a perfectly manicured finger. "Daddy, I can't believe you let that fat pig sit here and pretend she deserves anything from you." Her voice struck the air like a slap, sharp, cruel, echoing off every polished surface in that courtroom. For a moment, no one moved. Even the dust floating near the ceiling seemed to freeze midair, suspended between disbelief and discomfort. Then, slowly, like wolves encouraged by the first howl, the attorneys on her father's side let out stifled chuckles. One of them lowered his head, pretending to read a document, but I saw the corner of his mouth twitch. Another whispered something to the intern beside him, and they both tried to hide their amused smirks behind a stack of paper. Across the aisle, my soon-to-be ex-husband, Charles, didn't laugh. No, he did something far worse. He smiled. It wasn't a warm smile, nor even an apologetic one. It was a satisfied smile. The smile of a man who'd been waiting, no, hoping someone would say exactly what he didn't have the courage to say out loud. The judge slammed his gavel so hard the sound felt like it cracked down my spine. "Enough! This is a courtroom, not a playground." But the damage had already been done. I sat quietly, my gloved hands clasped on my lap, my breath steady in that poised, almost regal way I had practiced since I was a girl raised by a mother who believed dignity was a woman's strongest armor. I didn't shout. I didn't flinch. I didn't even touch the pearls resting on my collarbone, the ones my late mother left me and I wore today for courage. No, I simply blinked once and looked straight ahead. Because in moments of humiliation, silence can be louder than rage. Before we go any further, if you're listening to my story, tell me where you're watching from. Your comments remind me that even in painful chapters, we're never truly alone. And don't forget to like and subscribe so you never miss a new chapter. The harsh lights above hummed like irritated bees, casting unflattering shadows under everyone's eyes. The stale scent of old paper mixed with the faint cologne of Charles's lawyer drifted across the room. Somewhere behind me, a chair squeaked as someone shifted uncomfortably. And yet, despite all the noise, the whispers, the crackle of tension, there was a stillness around me, a bubble of quiet dignity that neither insults nor laughter could puncture. I folded the silk of my skirt neatly beneath me, a small gesture, a practiced one, the kind of movement elegant women make when they need to remind themselves they still belong to themselves, no matter who tries to strip them of it. "Mrs. Whitmore," the judge said, turning toward me with a more measured tone. "I apologize for the outburst. You may respond if you wish." I lifted my gaze, my voice soft but unwavering. "There's nothing to respond to, Your Honor. I won't dignify childish tantrums with commentary." A few people inhaled sharply. Camille rolled her eyes so hard her mascara smudged. Charles shifted, clearing his throat as if embarrassed, though not enough to defend me. He never did. Not when I sacrificed my career to raise his daughter while he built his empire. Not when she began speaking to me with thinly veiled disdain as a teenager. Not even when, in the past year, she openly mocked me during family gatherings, while he pretended not to hear. But today she revealed the venom she'd never dared unleash so boldly before. "Let's resume," the judge instructed, his patience clearly thinning. Charles's lawyer stood and began listing items of financial dispute. Our properties, the lake house, the investment accounts, and of course, the controlling shares of Whitmore Enterprises. My name floated in and out of the air like a delicate fragment between arguments. Mrs. Whitmore contributed minimally. Her lifestyle was funded by. She played no significant role in. Each statement was an erasure, each sentence a quiet attempt to rewrite our life together into something one-sided, something that painted me as a decoration instead of a partner. Camille leaned back smugly, legs crossed, her shoe dangling like she couldn't wait to stomp on my dignity again. She whispered loudly, knowing I would hear. "She shouldn't even be here. She looks ridiculous, like a stuffed pig at a banquet." This time, the laughter on their side wasn't hidden. It bubbled through the room like carbonation rising in a cheap soda. My attorney cast me an apologetic glance, but I remained serene. My expression soft, my posture perfect, my heart steady, Because in that moment, beneath the mockery, the humiliation, the echoes of laughter rolling like cheap thunder, I felt something shift inside me. Not anger, not sadness, not fear, clarity. A slow, warm, dignified clarity. The kind a seasoned woman feels when she realizes everyone who underestimates her is walking straight into their own ruin. The kind my mother used to describe when she'd say, "When a fool thinks you're weak, don't correct him. Let life do that for you." And life, it seemed, had been patiently setting the stage. The courtroom blurred for a moment, not from tears, but from memory. A memory of what they didn't know, what they didn't suspect, what would upend their smug smiles sooner than they could imagine. Because while they laughed at the pig they thought had no power, while they whispered and smirked and prepared to divide assets they believed already belonged to them, while my stepdaughter gloated as if she'd already won. I was sitting there holding a truth in my handbag that not a single one of them saw coming. A truth with a golden embossed seal. A truth signed and executed 3 months before the divorce filing. A truth that would make me, not Charles, the controlling force behind Whitmore Enterprises. I placed my hand lightly over the bag resting beside my chair. An elegant black leather piece that had been a gift from Charles 11 years ago, back when he still valued my judgment. Inside it lay the document that would reshape everything. I smoothed over the polished handle with a gentle grandmotherly grace. A gesture Camille mistook for nervousness, a gesture the attorneys misread as fragility, a gesture Charles interpreted as defeat. How amusing. They didn't understand that elegance is not weakness, dignity is not submission, and silence is not surrender. The judge continued speaking, but my attention drifted to the faint reflection of myself in the glossy wooden table. My silver hair neatly pinned, soft curls framing a face strengthened by years of holding families together, my silk blouse pressed perfectly, my pearls glowing faintly under the overhead light. I looked like a woman too gentle to fight, too polite to bite back, too aged to matter. But appearances are only truths to those who fail to look deeper. "Mrs. Whitmore," the judge said again, drawing me back into the room, "do you have any objections to the division of assets as proposed?" I paused, not because I was unsure, but because great moments deserve great timing. Just when Camille smirked, just when Charles exhaled as if relieved, just when the lawyers shifted their weight, ready to move on, I lifted my chin with the refined grace of a woman who has survived storms far worse than insults. "Yes, Your Honor," I said softly. The room stilled. "I do have objections, but I will save them for the appropriate setting." The judge nodded. "We will reconvene tomorrow morning. Court is adjourned." The gavel fell. The final note in today's humiliating symphony. But they didn't realize it was also the first note of my rising overture. As the courtroom emptied, I stood with deliberate elegance, gathered my things, and walked past them, not hurried, not shaken, but with the measured steps of someone who had already outgrown this room. Camille scoffed loudly behind me. "Ugh, she walks like she owns the place." "Not yet, dear. Not yet. But tomorrow. Tomorrow she would walk into a boardroom she believed belonged to her father. Tomorrow she would sit beside executives who once dismissed me. Tomorrow she would smirk again, right before her face fell apart in shock. Because tomorrow she would discover that the fat pig she mocked today was about to become something else entirely. Her father's new CEO. Before the courtroom, before the gavel, before the word pig was flung at me like a stone, there was a life I built with careful hands, steady patience, and a heart that believed family could be stitched together the way my mother once taught me to mend torn hems, gently, firmly, and with hope that the thread would hold. It's almost strange looking back now how quietly love can begin. Not the loud, fiery love of youth, but the steady, dignified kind a mature woman offers when she chooses a man not because she needs him, but because she believes she can build a life beside him. I met Charles Whitmore when I was 43. I was a widow then, a woman who had already known both warmth and loss. My first husband passed suddenly, leaving behind a small home, a quiet grief, and a daughter from his first marriage, whom I continued raising long after the courts said I didn't have to. People said I was too soft for this world, too forgiving, too willing to love people who looked past me. But softness isn't weakness. Softness can hold mountains. I learned that the day I met Charles. He walked into the charity gala with a confidence that seemed to light the room. Successful, polished, a man used to being admired. Yet when he stopped at my table, it wasn't his status that caught me. It was the way he looked at my hands. "You wear your strength quietly," he had said. "What makes you think that?" I asked with a faint smile. "Because," he replied, "women like you don't boast, they build." And perhaps that was the moment, small, insignificant to anyone watching, when I allowed my heart to wonder if love could return to me. Our courtship was elegant and paced, full of quiet dinners and long conversations about legacy, work, and family. By the time we married, I had come to know him not as the powerful CEO the city admired, but as a man still healing from his own heartbreak. His first wife had died when Camille, his daughter, was just 16. And oh, that girl. She was a storm wrapped in silk ribbons, beautiful, yes, smart, fiercely so, but wounded, and thus quick to wound others. When Charles introduced me to her, she looked me up and down with eyes too old for her age. "So this is your replacement?" she said. "Camille," Charles warned, but I simply smiled. "No," I corrected gently. "I'm not here to replace anyone, only to help heal what time hasn't." She didn't reply. She only pressed her lips together in a thin, icy line, a look I would come to know intimately over the years. But I didn't give up. I couldn't, because I knew what it was like to lose a mother young. I knew the hollow ache that lingers beneath the ribs long after the world believes you've moved on. So I tried and tried, and tried again. I braided her hair before school when she let me. I attended every recital, sitting in the front row with a camera Charles never remembered to bring. I waited for her after tennis practice with a thermos of my homemade ginger tea. I even gave her my mother's sapphire brooch on her 18th birthday, something priceless, sentimental, irreplaceable. She accepted it without a thank you, but she did wear it that night, and for me, that was enough. Whitmore Enterprises was already successful before I entered their lives, but success, true, lasting success, requires structure, order, reliability. 3 things Charles lacked in abundance. He was a dreamer, a brilliant strategist, but hopeless at organization. So naturally, without ever requesting a title or recognition, I stepped in, quietly, elegantly. The way wives of my mother's generation used to run entire households without being credited for running empires. I sorted contracts. I rewrote internal policies to protect the company. I revised presentations before the board meetings. I negotiated vendor pricing using charm, tact, and a well-timed smile. I soothed conflicts between executives with decency and diplomacy. For 20 years, the company grew. For 20 years, Charles thrived. For 20 years, I poured myself into a machine whose public achievements had his name carved into every plaque, while my fingerprints remained invisible. And that was fine. I didn't want applause. I only wanted my family to be whole. But Camille? She never let me in. She lived in the same home, ate at the same table, celebrated Christmas under the same chandelier I polished each year. But she looked at me as though I were a guest who overstayed her welcome. Polite enough to acknowledge, never warm enough to embrace. When she moved out at 21, she hugged Charles so tightly his face turned red. When she turned to me, she extended just 2 fingers for a handshake. "Thank you," she said, with a voice dipped in something cold and brittle. "For trying. Trying, not succeeding. Trying." I held on to that word longer than I should have. Years later, when she bought a penthouse condo with Charles's money, she didn't invite me to see it. When she got her first luxury car, she thanked her father in a long Instagram post and referred to herself as the only woman he ever truly loved. I didn't comment. I didn't complain. That wasn't my way. Instead, I kept opening my home to her. Birthdays with ribboned boxes and carefully chosen gifts, graduation dinners where I toasted her achievements and she toasted her father, Thanksgiving tables where I carved the turkey while she carved my dignity with subtle remarks like, "You cook well," for someone that's not from our side of the family. Outsider. That was the word she never said aloud but painted across every interaction. I was always the outsider, even after 20 years of marriage. Even after raising her as though she were my own, even after running the company that funded her lavish lifestyle. But a dignified woman knows her worth, even when others refuse to see it. My marriage to Charles wasn't perfect, but it wasn't tragic either. It was steady, at least for most of its years. I loved him, in my own quiet, subtle way, and he loved me too. perhaps not with the fiery devotion of young couples, but with gratitude, companionship, and a shared understanding of responsibility. But as he aged, and as the company grew, he changed. Or perhaps he grew into who he always was, the kind of man who enjoys being admired and forgets the hands that built the pedestal he stands on. When people began complimenting me at business galas for Whitmore Enterprises' new direction, Charles was quick to correct them. "Oh, I have an amazing team," he'd say. No mention of the wife who stayed awake until 2 in the morning editing his reports. When the board praised a shift in operations, he would smile and say, "I've always had a good instinct for business." I would simply smile back because I didn't need applause from the room to know the truth. But Camille saw it differently. To her, my success in the company was an intrusion, a threat, proof that I had entered a world that belonged to her and her father, not to the woman who had married into it. "You're not a Whitmore," she once told me at a Christmas party, her voice low enough that only I heard. "You're just borrowing the name." I remember setting down my glass of mulled wine, letting the cinnamon scent calm my temper. "Names don't make families, Camille," I replied softly. "Actions do." She rolled her eyes and walked away, her sequined dress catching the light like shattered glass. I always kept a quiet home, not because I feared conflict, but because I believed peace should live where people sleep. My mother taught me that a woman with a calm house raises calm hearts. But over time, my home became quiet for a different reason. Charles started spending later nights at the office. Camille visited less and less. Dinners turned into individual meals eaten at opposite ends of the house. Our once shared laughter withered into polite conversations spoken through half-open doors. Still, I tried, because that is who I am. And for a while, I believed trying was enough, until the day it wasn't. I remember the moment everything shifted, the tiny incident that would later reveal itself as the beginning of the end. Charles had returned home from a board retreat, his face flushed, his tie uneven. He seemed distracted, irritated by the smallest things, the folded hand towels, the scent of lavender in the hallway, even the softness of the lighting. "What's wrong?" I asked gently. He exhaled sharply. "Nothing, just everything is changing. The company's changing. You're the one leading it," I reminded him. He paused, stared at me. "Yes," he said with a slow blink, "and maybe that's the problem." I didn't understand what he meant then, but I would soon enough. Because when men feel threatened, not by enemies, but by the women quietly holding up their world, they lash out not with fists, but with coldness, and coldness hurts deeper than steel. When the divorce papers arrived, I wasn't surprised, not fully. I had felt the shift months before they were delivered. But what did surprise me, what sliced me in a place no surgeon's scalpel could reach, was discovering that Camille had been involved from the beginning. She had helped draft the paperwork. She had suggested the asset divisions. She had whispered in her father's ear that I was entitled to nothing but gratitude. Outsider. Always the outsider. Yet in those months leading to the hearing, as the house grew colder and the distance between us widened like a canyon, I didn't crumble. I rearranged files. I organized legal documents. I reviewed corporate codes. I met quietly with lawyers not connected to Charles or his empire. I gathered every thread of dignity left in my possession. Because women like me, the dignified kind, do not erupt. We prepare, we preserve, we plan, and when the moment comes, we rise with such grace that our enemies mistake our composure for defeat. It was almost poetic, really, how the girl I once braided hair for, the girl I once held through her heartbreaks, the girl I once defended against her teachers when she lashed out in grief, became the woman who would scream pig at me in a public courtroom. Irony is a quiet companion to life. It rarely announces itself. But destiny has impeccable timing, and Camille would soon learn, tragically for her, beautifully for justice, that the outsider she mocked, belittled, and dismissed was holding the keys to the kingdom she believed belonged to her. You would think a woman could grow accustomed to disappointment after a lifetime of carrying other people's burdens with grace. But nothing, absolutely nothing, prepared me for the particular sting of hearing my husband of 26 years refer to me as old baggage. He didn't say it to my face. Of course not. Men like Charles rarely choose courage when cruelty will do. No. He saved those words for the corridor outside the courtroom, where he believed I had already gone ahead. He didn't know I had paused just beyond the door, fixing the clasp on my handbag, the one that held the document they were all blind to, the one that would soon upend their world. I heard their footsteps first, Camille's impatient click, click, click of designer heels, followed by Charles's heavy, irritated stride. They moved like two vultures circling a single carcass, one eager and triumphant, the other weary but willing. "Daddy, she's pathetic," Camille hissed. "Did you see her face when I called her a pig? I mean, honestly, how long have you been carrying that old baggage?" Old. Baggage, two words, so simple and so sharp, they cut deeper than the insults shouted in court. Charles didn't defend me. He didn't sigh or correct her. He didn't even attempt a half-hearted reprimand. Instead, he responded with a sound I recognized all too well, a low, tired groan that meant agreement wrapped in reluctance, a sound he often made when Camille pushed him toward a bad decision, and he followed anyway. "We just need to get through this, Camille," he muttered. "Once the divorce is finalized, things will settle." "Settle?" she scoffed. "Daddy, be serious. The company needs a fresh direction. You need someone young by your side, not a grandmother with fading influence. A grandmother." As if the word were an insult, as though age diminishes a woman's worth instead of sharpening her wisdom. I held my breath and remained still, standing just inches from the doorway. The hallway light hummed overhead, and even the air seemed to lean closer, desperate to catch what would come next. Camille continued, her tone dripping with entitlement. "We have to make sure she gets nothing from the company. Nothing. She's been leeching off you for years. And honestly," her heels paused, "she's too old to be involved in anything important now." Charles didn't protest. He didn't remind her that I had helped build that company. He didn't mention how many nights I'd spent drafting letters and restructuring operations. He simply sighed again. "I've talked to the attorneys," he said. "We'll argue that she contributed minimally, that the growth happened under my leadership." "That's right," Camille chirped. "And the sooner she's out of the picture, the better. We need to start grooming the board for your transition. And once you retire, everything goes to me." "Retire?" My hand tightened on my handbag. Charles hadn't mentioned retirement. He hadn't mentioned a transition plan, and certainly not a succession involving Camille. She continued, oblivious to how her words sliced through the air. "And when I take over as CEO, everything will run smoothly again. Finally, no more old-fashioned nonsense, no more outdated policies, no more slow decision-making because someone needs time to rest their joints." So that was the plan. A neatly wrapped betrayal with a glittering bow of ambition. My heart didn't break. No, it hardened. Slowly, elegantly, like porcelain cured in heat. Charles spoke again, softer this time, almost apologetic. She won't go quietly, Camille. You know how she is." "Yes," Camille replied. "Graceful, polite, boring. She won't make a scene." My breath caught. So that was what they believed of me. That dignity equaled weakness. That quietness meant compliance. That my controlled composure was evidence of powerlessness. Camille laughed, a sound sharp enough to scratch glass. "She thinks she belongs in our world. Isn't it adorable?" Our world. My world. The company I had helped steady after a major financial downturn. The partnerships I had negotiated when Charles nearly destroyed a merger through arrogance. The staff I supported through restructuring when morale dipped. The brand image I refined through strategic public engagement. But of course, none of that was visible to a girl who lived off her father's name like a lamp drawing power from a hidden cord. "Tomorrow," Camille said triumphantly, "we push for her removal from everything, her accounts, her board access, her stake. Father, we need her completely out." I felt the cold marble wall at my back as I leaned against it. Not because their words wounded me, no, but because finally I understood the full depth of their intentions. They weren't just trying to take the company. They were trying to erase me, erase the years I'd given, erase the stability I'd built, erase the dignity I had maintained even when their cruelty piled high like winter snow. Charles's voice softened as he spoke, guilt filtering through the cracks. "I supposed it's time. She's had her place in the family. But, well, she's getting older. She won't keep up." Older. Won't keep up. Funny. I had never fallen behind a day in my life. Before I could fully process the brutality of his words, Camille launched into another tirade. And after she's out, we push for a full company restructure. New leadership, me obviously. And you'll stay on as chairman. Doesn't that sound perfect? I heard Charles's quiet chuckle, a sound that once brought me comfort. Now it felt like a dagger dipped in poison. You always were ambitious, my darling, he said. Darling, he hadn't called me that in years. And then, as if fate wanted to twist the knife further, Camille added, Honestly, Daddy, I don't know why you married her in the first place. You could have done so much better. Silence from Charles. A mercy. No, cowardice. I closed my eyes. Not to shut them out, but to see clearer the path that now stood before me. If this had been 10 or even 5 years ago, perhaps tears would have pooled behind my lashes. Perhaps my breath would have quivered. Perhaps I would have clutched my pearls and prayed for strength. But I am a grandmother now. A woman shaped by storms, defined by resilience, sharpened by time. I listened, not as a wounded wife, but as a strategist. I stepped into the hallway before they knew I was there. Camille turned first. Her expression flickered, surprise, then something like delight at the chance to wound me again. Oh, she said, eyes narrowing. Look who's still lurking around. Her voice was honey-coated poison, the kind young vipers use before they show their fangs. I straightened my shoulders, smoothed my blouse, and met her gaze calmly. Elegance as armor, dignity as shield. She looked me up and down with exaggerated disgust. Honestly, she said loudly, ensuring everyone nearby heard, you really should have left before embarrassing yourself further. Watching you try to keep up with adult conversations in there was painful. A nearby attorney snickered. Someone else coughed awkwardly. Charles wouldn't meet my eyes. Then Camille delivered the blow she'd been waiting for. You've always been the dead weight in this family, and after tomorrow, you'll finally be gone. My pulse slowed, not from fear, but from clarity, as sharp and bright as sunrise on glass. This girl, this child who had never held a job, never signed a paycheck, never built anything in her life, believed she was pushing me out of a world she thought belonged solely to her. How breathtakingly blind she was. Inside my handbag was the truth. A truth Charles had signed during a financial panic 3 months ago. A document transferring controlling interest to me as part of a temporary risk mitigation strategy. A document he thought would stay hidden until after the crisis. A document the board honored before he regretted it. A document Camille had no knowledge of. A document that made me, not them, the next CEO of Whitmore Enterprises. They weren't planning to push me out. No, they were planning to push out their future CEO. I didn't speak. Not yet. Some truths deserve a throne before they are revealed. Instead, I smiled. A soft, dignified smile that made Camille falter for just a heartbeat. And as I walked away, the click of my heels echoed like a countdown on polished marble. Tick, tick, tick. 24 hours until they learned the truth. 24 hours until their cruelty turned to horror. 24 hours until the old baggage became the woman who would carry the entire company forward. 24 hours until the pig became their boss. Tomorrow, the real story would begin. The world has a certain hush before a storm, a quietness so delicate, so deceptive, that only a seasoned woman can sense the shift in the air. As I stepped out of the courthouse that afternoon, after hearing myself labeled old baggage and fat pig by the very people I once called family, I felt that hush settle over me like a silk scarf. Not sorrow, not anger, not even humiliation, just stillness, and beneath it, purpose. My heels clicked steadily across the stone courtyard, each step a reminder of grace under fire. Behind me, Charles and Camille erupted from the courthouse doors, wrapped in whispered arguments, but I didn't turn back. Their voices were fading noise, petty, brittle things that no longer held weight. I had somewhere else to be, somewhere more important. Whitmore Tower, the headquarters of the company they believed solely belonged to them. The wind picked up as I approached the tall glass doors. My reflection flickered faintly in them. Silver hair pinned neatly, pearl earrings glowing softly, posture elegant despite the emotional blows I'd endured just minutes earlier. I looked like a woman ready to sign a treaty, not someone fighting for scraps from a crumbling marriage. Inside the lobby, polished marble gleamed under chandeliers. The scent of citrus polish and fresh lilies lingered, a familiar, comforting combination. Receptionists glanced up, offering polite nods. Some knew me, some didn't. For years, I chose the background, not the spotlight. It was easier that way, safer. But decisions made in safety rarely shape destiny. And today, destiny was at the front of the building, waiting for me in the form of Samuel Alden, a senior board member whose loyalty ran deeper than public perception. He stood as I entered the private lounge, tall, composed, with the kind of posture that came from decades in corporate rooms where one learned the art of speaking without speaking too much. "Mrs. Whitmore," he greeted, offering a respectful bow of his head. "I've been expecting you." Expecting me. Such a simple phrase, and yet such profound reassurance. "Samuel," I replied softly, removing my gloves one by one with the grace of a woman unraveling layers of restraint. "Thank you for coming on such short notice." He gestured toward a discreet conference room. "This conversation is long overdue." Waiting on the table was a sealed envelope with an old-fashioned wax stamp, deep burgundy pressed with my late father's insignia, an intertwined W and C for William Carlyle. A tremor passed through my fingers. "My father?" I whispered. Samuel nodded, his eyes warm with an emotion I rarely saw among the board. He prepared this before he passed. He instructed it be given to you only upon 2 conditions. My heart beat slower, heavier. What conditions? Samuel folded his hands. 1. If the stability of Whitmore Enterprises were ever threatened by internal greed. He paused meaningfully. And 2. If your marriage to Charles ever entered proceedings for dissolution. A soft, humorless laugh slipped from my lips. So he anticipated today long before I did. Samuel's expression didn't change. Your father was a perceptive man, and he trusted you more than you realized. My fingers brushed over the envelope. Old paper faintly scented with cedar, as though the memory of my father lingered insistently. I remembered him at his desk, spectacles perched low, ink staining the side of his hand. His soft but steady voice. A woman's intelligence must never be underestimated, not even by herself. With a deep breath, I broke the wax seal. Inside were 3 documents. The first, a letter penned by my father's unmistakable elegant script. The second, a legal transfer certificate. And the third, an updated shareholder ledger. My vision blurred for a moment as I read the opening lines of the letter. My dearest Evelyn, if you're reading this, then the time has come for you to lead. Lead, not support, not advise, lead. Emotion pricked behind my eyes, but I blinked it away. There was too much at stake to indulge in softness, at least for now. I continued reading. I have watched you build others up your entire life, watched you place your light behind the curtains so others may stand in the glow. But I did not raise you to live unseen. Your wisdom is your inheritance. Your strength is your legacy, and Whitmore Enterprises needs you more than it knows. My breath trembled, but my posture did not. I have transferred my silent shares to you. Combined with your marital holdings, you are, and will remain, the majority shareholder of Whitmore Enterprises. I stopped breathing. Truly stopped. The air froze in my lungs. Majority shareholder. Not an assistant, not a contributor, not a quiet partner behind the scenes. Majority, meaning the company answers to me. Not Charles, not Camille, me. I lifted my gaze to Samuel. He nodded once, slow, steady, affirming. It's all legitimate, he said. Your father ensured the paperwork was airtight. He trusted only a handful of us with the knowledge. But how? I began. How did Charles not know? Oh, he did, Samuel replied. For 3 months. The transfer was activated during the financial scare last quarter. He just didn't think you would ever claim your authority. Of course. Because when a woman spends years supporting a man's success, he begins to mistake her humility for lack of ambition. But humility is often simply patience, and my patience, it seemed, had matured into opportunity. Samuel slid another folder toward me, this one crisp, freshly printed, with the company logo embossed on the cover. Mrs. Whitmore, the board convened informally last night, he said. Given the instability caused by your husband's financial decisions and the attempt to restructure leadership without notifying shareholders. Yes. His whispered plans with Camille, their gleeful ambition to oust me as though I were a decorative figurine on a shelf they no longer liked. We have agreed, Samuel continued, to initiate a leadership transition. As majority shareholder, you are the natural successor. Successor? Such a heavy word, such a powerful one. I felt it settle into my bones, into the hollow places left by betrayal, filling them not with pride but with purpose. Samuel, I said slowly, what exactly are you telling me? He smiled slightly, just enough to show respect, not arrogance. I'm telling you that as of midnight tonight, you will be formally introduced to the board as the incoming CEO of Whitmore Enterprises. The silence in the room deepened. The lilies in the corner seemed to hold their breath. Even the soft hum of the air conditioning felt like it stilled in reverence. CEO, Charles's position, the seat he assumed would always be his. The title he believed Camille would inherit someday. CEO, me, a grandmother, a woman they dismissed, a woman they humiliated, a woman they thought powerless. Soft laughter escaped me, quiet, elegant, filled with a depth Charles and Camille would never understand. They called me a pig, I murmured, letting the memory roll over me like a wave that no longer stung. I lifted the folder with steady hands. But tomorrow they will call me CEO. Samuel's eyes glimmered with approval. I have never doubted you would rise to match the role, he said. Many of us have waited for this moment. I closed the envelope, pressing the wax seal gently as though sealing a chapter of my own life. This wasn't victory. Not yet. Victory is loud, messy, triumphant. What I felt was something quieter, more profound. Alignment. The moment when life shifts into place after years of being nudged into shadows. Outside, the city lights shimmered like scattered jewels across the skyline. My driver opened the door, but I raised a hand gently. No, thank you. I'd like a moment. He stepped back respectfully. The autumn breeze brushed against my cheeks, cool and refreshing. The weight of the documents in my handbag felt like a second pulse, a quiet rhythm of destiny knocking politely instead of barging in. I inhaled deeply. Lavender from a passing pedestrian, the faint scent of rain on pavement, a distant hum of traffic. The city was alive, and I, in this moment, felt equally so. For years, I had stayed quiet to keep peace. For years, I had stepped aside so others could step forward. For years, I had mistaken support for invisibility. But invisibility does not erase power. It hides it, nurtures it, strengthens it. My father had known that. The board had known that. And tomorrow, Charles and Camille would learn it the hard way. I slipped into the car at last, the door closing with a soft, decisive click. As we pulled away from the tower, my phone buzzed. A message from Charles. We need to talk about the assets tomorrow. Be reasonable. Another from Camille. Enjoy your last night in that house. Tomorrow, everything changes. Oh, my dear girl, if only you knew how right you were. Everything would change, just not in the way you imagined. I typed one message back, only 3 words. I look forward to tomorrow, to the confrontation, to the revelation, to reclaiming the life I built silently behind the scenes. For decades, I gave all my strength to lift them. Tomorrow, I would use that same strength to stand above them. The night before, a storm is always quiet. Not empty, quiet. A stillness that settles over everything like a velvet curtain, letting only the boldest hearts see what comes next. I felt that quiet as soon as I stepped back into my home that evening, the house I had arranged, decorated, and cared for through 26 years of marriage. The same house my stepdaughter mockingly insisted I would lose by tomorrow. How poetic that she believed this was the end. How beautifully ironic that this was merely the intermission. I set my handbag gently on the marble console table, the documents inside it, humming with invisible electricity. The lights in the foyer glowed softly, casting gentle reflections against the polished floor. My footsteps echoed with purpose, not anger, not desperation. Purpose. Silent, elegant purpose, the kind of purpose only a woman ignored one too many times can summon. I removed my pearls and placed them in their velvet tray, symbols of a quiet grace I had worn like armor all these years. Tonight, however, I did not need armor. I needed clarity, a sharp mind, and the steady resolve of a woman who knew exactly how to dismantle a kingdom without raising her voice. Asterisk, asterisk. Because revenge that shouts is childish, but revenge whispered, that is art. Asterisk. Asterisk. I made myself a cup of chamomile tea, the steam rising in delicate swirls. My hands did not shake, my heart did not race, because everything was falling into place, quietly, as it should. By the time I entered my study, the clock on the wall read 7:48 p.m. The room smelled faintly of old books and cedar polish, reminding me of my father's study where I once sat on his lap, tracing the lines of his ledger with childish fascination. Information, he used to say, is the first thread in any tapestry of power. I opened my laptop, logged in, and began weaving. The first task, documentation. I pulled out the sealed envelope, opened its contents, and organized the transfer certificates, those shareholder directives and succession confirmations into a series of digital files, each one meticulously labeled and cross-referenced, so that even in the unlikely event someone attempted to challenge them, the evidence would crumble their argument before it began. With every scan, every signature, every saved file, I felt something expand inside me. Not ego, not pride, but rightful ownership rising quietly to its place. By the time I finished, the folder titled Leadership Transition, Evelyn Whitmore, was 74 files deep. I stared at that title for a moment, let its truth settle into my bones. For years, I had been Evelyn of the background, Evelyn who makes things run, Evelyn who is overlooked until needed. But Evelyn Whitmore, the CEO? That was new even to me, and it fit beautifully. Next came the email, one simple message to the board, one quiet spark placed into the world with the poised precision of a woman lighting a candle in a dark cathedral. Subject, emergency board meeting, 8 a.m., tomorrow. Body, per shareholder authority and recent developments, an urgent meeting is required. Attendance is mandatory. Agenda will be disclosed upon arrival. Confidentiality expected. E. Whitmore. No explanation. No justification, no apology. Let them wonder, let them whisper. Let them feel the same tension that had been cracking my spine for months as I watched Charles slowly drift from reason and Camille step fully into her father's shadow. This email wasn't noise. It was the essence of power, clear, calm, unquestionable. When I hit send, a gentle chime echoed through the room. It sounded almost like the soft ring of a crystal wine glass after a toast to change, a toast to reclamation, a toast to tomorrow. After midnight, my house was silent, but not still. The kind of silence that settles when fate pauses to watch a woman remake her life. I logged into the company's secure portal. My access, despite Charles's earlier attempts to minimize my involvement, was still privileged, because somewhere deep within the administrative layers of the company, a younger Evelyn had made sure she always retained certain permissions, just in case. And tonight? Tonight was precisely just in case. My fingers danced across the keyboard. New credentials, new administrator rights, new encryption keys, new approval paths requiring my authorization. Every keystroke was a quiet violin note in the orchestra of my silent revenge. The system blinked. Confirmed, updated. Charles's access? Reduced to basic executive privileges. Still functional for now because removing it abruptly would cause suspicion before the board meeting. Camille's proxy access, granted through her father's carelessness, was quietly disabled. Not removed, disabled, so that tomorrow when she tried to use it in front of the board to impress them, it would fail publicly, beautifully, devastatingly. I leaned back in my chair, the glow of the monitor illuminating my face with a soft blue light. My reflection shimmered faintly on the screen, not harsh, not tired, just resolved, with the serenity of a woman who knew exactly what she was doing. Next came the discretionary funds. For years, Charles had funneled personal indulgences and quiet family support gifts through accounts labeled as operational buffers. I hadn't interfered then because I believed marriage meant trust, but trust is not infinite, and mine had reached its elegant end. I navigated to the internal financial management system, moved slowly, intentionally. Account 14B, Executive Personal Allocation, frozen. Account 18C, Family Expense Discretionary Fund, frozen. Account 22A, CEO Lifestyle Expenditure, locked pending administrative review. That one made me smile, because the CEO Lifestyle Expenditure account would belong to me in a matter of hours. And when they saw it locked tomorrow morning, oh, the scrambling panic, the frantic phone calls, the accusatory whispers, all designed to uncover the culprit, none prepared for the truth. By 1:15 a.m., the house felt lighter, as though decades of quiet suppression had finally lifted their weight from its walls. My tea had gone cold, The moonlight spilled gently through my study windows, and I felt more awake than I had in months. Because silent revenge is not chaos. It is clarity. It is restraint. It is the slow, deliberate unfurling of truth at the exact moment it can no longer be ignored. I stood and walked to my mirror. The same antique oval mirror I had inherited from my mother, a piece of her that had seen me through every storm of womanhood. I looked into it, not searching for beauty, but for resolve. There she was, a grandmother, a wife, a woman dismissed, a woman underestimated, a woman reborn. My reflection stared back with dignity sharpened into something nearly regal. "You will not whisper tomorrow," I said softly to her. "You will not wait your turn. You will not shrink so others may feel tall." I rested a hand lightly against the mirror's wooden frame. "Tomorrow you speak." My phone buzzed just after 2 a.m. Charles. Perhaps he sensed the shift in the air. Perhaps his guilt clawed its way into his sleep. Perhaps Camille had convinced him to call and try to manipulate my emotions before the meeting they didn't yet know was coming. But I let it ring, and ring, until it stopped. The next call came minutes later. Camille. I didn't even look at the screen before silencing it. There is something powerful in the silence of a woman who finally refuses to be summoned. I opened my closet and selected a navy blue suit. Tailored, elegant, authoritative without trying. A silk blouse in cream, comfortable heels with a modest shine, not flashy, not loud, just dignified, just commanding. A woman's outfit is not her power, but it is the stage where her power steps forward. I laid the clothes out carefully. Tomorrow would not be a day to improvise. Tomorrow needed precision. Before going to bed, I sat at my writing desk and penned one more letter. One sentence repeated 3 times, each version more deliberate than the last. I accept the role of Chief Executive Officer of Whitmore Enterprises. Below it, I placed my signature. Elegant, steady, unshakable. I slid the letter into a new envelope and rested it atop the board folder. By 3 a.m., I extinguished the last lamp. Tomorrow, the world would wake expecting an obedient woman to surrender her place. Tomorrow, Charles and Camille would walk into the boardroom confident in their victory. Tomorrow, they would speak boldly of restructuring, of transitions, of removal. And tomorrow, I would let them speak, and speak, and speak, until the moment came for me to stand, open my folder, place the documents on the table, and let silence fall the way only truth can make it fall. Elegant, powerful, final. Because silent revenge is not about destruction, it is about revelation. And my revelation was coming with the dawn. Morning arrived not with sunlight, but with purpose. The sky outside my bedroom windows was painted in muted shades of silver, the kind of dawn that feels respectful, quiet, poised, waiting. A fitting backdrop for the day the world I'd silently held together for decades would finally tilt into its rightful place. I dressed slowly, deliberately, allowing each motion to settle into my bones like a ritual. The navy suit, the cream silk blouse, the tasteful pearl earrings, nothing excessive, nothing flamboyant, just the dignified elegance of a woman who didn't need sparkles to shine. By 7:15 a.m., my car was gliding through the city streets toward Whitmore Tower. The building rose through the fog like a familiar sentinel, tall, gleaming, and steeped in memories of work I had poured into its foundations, even if my name had never been etched into any recognition plaque. That would change soon. Oh, that would change. When the car stopped under the sweeping awning of the executive entrance, I stepped out with the measured grace of someone who has prepared not just for a moment, but for a lifetime. The glass door slid open and a hush of cool air greeted me, mingled with the faint scent of lemon polish and corporate ambition. The floors shone like polished marble chessboards, waiting for someone to make the next move. And I already had, many of them. The receptionist, Diana, a woman with kind eyes who always remembered my favorite tea, glanced up from her desk. When she saw me, something flickered across her face. Not surprise, not confusion, recognition, respect, as if she knew something was different today. "Good morning, Mrs. Whitmore," she greeted softly, straightening slightly in her chair. "Good morning, Diana. Is the board assembled?" "They are arriving now," she said, her voice almost reverent. "Meeting room 12. "Thank you." I moved toward the elevators, the soft click of my heels echoing in the high-ceilinged lobby. A few employees glanced my way, some out of politeness, some out of curiosity. There had always been whispers about the quiet woman who had influence without ever flaunting it. Today, those whispers would be answered. Just as the elevator doors began to close, someone shouted behind me, "Stop that elevator!" Ah, her. The doors opened again, and Camille stormed in like a hurricane wearing luxury brand lipstick. Her hair was perfect, curled and glossy. Her tailored cream coat flared dramatically as she spun toward me, her eyes already hard with disdain. "What are you doing here so early?" she snapped. Her voice was sharp, brittle, like glass that didn't yet know it was about to shatter. "I have a meeting," I replied simply. She scoffed, flipping her hair. "A meeting? With who? The housekeeping staff?" The elevator hummed upward. She didn't know, not yet. We reached the 30th floor, the executive level. Normally, only Charles and the top leadership walked these halls. Today, Camille strolled forward as though she already lived here. "I need to speak with the finance department," she announced loudly to anyone within earshot. "My allowance didn't hit my account this morning. Someone will be fired for that." Someone. She didn't even consider the possibility that it had been intentional. "And I want access cards restored to my father's private suite," she continued, waving her phone. "Dad's privileges were restricted overnight. Probably some system error. Fix it." A passing manager turned pale. "Miss Whitmore, I'm not authorized to—" She cut him off with a slicing gesture of her hand. "And another thing," she added, "my thermostat in the corporate apartment, locked at 70 degrees. Do I look like someone who lives at 70 degrees? She pointed at herself from head to toe. "My hair frizzes at 70 degrees. This is unacceptable." The manager swallowed hard. "Miss Whitmore, those changes came from the administrative override." "Exactly," Camille said, "which is why I need to speak with my father so he can fire whoever thought they were brave enough to tamper with." The manager cut her off gently, voice trembling. "Miss Whitmore?" She turned sharply, eyes blazing. He bowed his head slightly. "You will need to discuss all of these concerns with our new CEO." The hallway seemed to tilt. Camille's eyebrows shot upward. "New CEO," she repeated slowly as though tasting the words. "Excuse me?" "Yes," he stammered. "The board appointed a new CEO early this morning." Camille laughed, loud, incredulous, shrill. "A new CEO? Without me or Dad knowing? Impossible. You must be confused." Her words slapped the air, but the manager remained steady. "You may find them in boardroom 12, he said quietly. "Them?" she demanded. "Who is them? Who did they pick? Some old board fossil? Some outsider with a fancy degree? Who?" The manager didn't dare answer. He just stepped aside and gestured toward the double doors at the end of the corridor. Boardroom 12, where everything had already been decided. Camille stormed forward with vengeance in her heels, muttering expletives and threats under her breath. "This is ridiculous. My father built this entire empire. How dare they? I'll have legal file an injunction. Someone will pay for this." She didn't look back, but I followed at a calm, respectful pace, the way a queen might follow a princess who was still too young to understand what crowns truly cost. As she neared the boardroom, she slowed, confusion creasing her forehead. Voices murmured inside. Important voices, bored voices. Men and women her father had sought approval from all his life. Camille pushed the door open so hard it slammed against the wall. "What the hell is going on in here?" The room fell silent. One by one, the board members turned. Their eyes drifted not to her, but behind her, to me. And then they stood. Every single one of them. Camille blinked, looked from face to face, bewildered. Why is everyone standing?" she demanded. Samuel, ever composed, gestured toward the head of the table, the CEO's seat. "Out of respect," he said simply. "For our new leader." Camille spun toward the chair at the end of the long mahogany table. And there I sat, composed, poised, silk blouse glowing softly in the filtered morning light, hands folded neatly, documents arranged before me, a grandmother, a woman she called a pig, a woman she dismissed as old baggage, a woman she believed powerless. But in that moment, I was everything she feared but hadn't yet imagined. Her face drained of color, no outrage, no clever insult, no mocking smirk, just the raw, involuntary shock of a woman who suddenly realizes the ground beneath her isn't ground at all. It's the edge of a cliff. I waited 3 seconds. Let her absorb it. Let the silence sink in like heavy velvet. Then I spoke. "Good morning, Camille." She stared at me. speechless, trembling. "Welcome," I continued gently, "to your first day working under me." Her mouth dropped open. A tiny, breathy sound escaped her. Not a word, just disbelief. I leaned back slightly in the CEO chair. My chair. "You came in demanding your allowance," I said softly. "Your father's privileges, your apartment settings." A ripple of discomfort moved through the room. Camille looked around, realizing for the first time that she was no longer speaking among servants who feared her temper. Here she was surrounded by wolves, graceful wolves, educated wolves, rich wolves, but wolves nonetheless. I don't understand," she stammered finally. This is a mistake, a joke, a prank. Dad would never—" "He knew," Samuel interrupted gently but firmly. "He was informed last night." Her head snapped toward him. "Informed of what?" "That Mrs. Whitmore," he said, nodding toward me, "is the majority shareholder of Whitmore Enterprises." The words rolled across the room like quiet thunder. "No," Camille whispered. "No, that's not possible. She doesn't own anything. Dad said she never contributed." Dad said, "Your father," I said calmly, "did not fully understand the nature of the share transfers activated during the financial protections enacted last quarter." She shook her head violently. "What does that mean? Speak normal English." "It means," I replied, my voice soft but unwavering, "that your grandfather entrusted his holdings to me, and when the financial threshold was crossed, those silent shares activated." Her breathing hitched. "And combined with my marital holdings," I continued, "I now own 57% of this company." The board members nodded in acknowledgement. Camille staggered back a step, gripping the edge of a chair for support. You can't be serious, and this can't— What about my inheritance? What about my future? What about—" "Sit down, Camille," I said gently. Her eyes flashed with panic. "I said sit," I repeated. Not loud, not harsh, but with the deep, commanding tone of a woman who had finally stepped into the space she'd been denied for years. She sat, slowly, as though her knees no longer trusted themselves. I lifted the transition documents, the board's signatures shining elegantly under the recessed lighting. "As of this morning, I am the CEO of Whitmore Enterprises." Silence, thick, heavy, absolute. "And as CEO," I continued, "there will be several immediate changes to discretionary spending, executive access, and governance conduct." Her jaw clenched. "You froze my accounts?" "Yes," I said. "You locked Dad out?" "Yes." She swallowed hard. "You took everything." I tilted my head slightly. "No, dear. I claimed what was already mine, what I built, what I stewarded, what I held together while you enjoyed the benefits without understanding the cost." Her eyes glistened, not with tears of remorse, but with stunned disbelief. But you're just older," I supplied gently. "A grandmother?" Her lips trembled. "Yes," I said softly. "Exactly." I leaned forward. "And the next time you call a grandmother a pig—" I paused, letting the room hold its breath. "Be certain she isn't the woman signing your paycheck." A gasp spread through the board. Camille's face went stark white. "Now," I concluded, folding my hands, "shall we begin today's meeting?" The board members nodded. Chairs slid, documents rustled, and Camille, small in her seat and stripped of her entitlement, whispered the first true words she had ever spoken to me. "What have I done?" I didn't answer. Life would teach her soon enough. If the confrontation had been the storm, then what followed was the rebuilding. Steady, intentional, meticulous. A storm's true power isn't revealed in the thunder. It's revealed in what it rearranges. The morning I took the CEO chair, life rearranged itself around me. And for the first time in decades, it aligned exactly where it should have been all along. The boardroom meeting ended with murmurs of respect, cautious glances toward me, and several outright looks of relief. Relief that someone capable had stepped in. Relief that the chaos Charles had been brewing behind the scenes could finally be contained. Relief that Whitmore Enterprises, its legacy, its foundation, its billion-dollar influence, was in the hands of someone who cared more for its people than its profits. But most of all, there was relief that Camille was no longer being groomed to lead. As the directors filed out, offering their congratulations and pledges of cooperation, I remained seated for a moment. I watched them go, men and women whom I had once served coffee to at galas, who barely noticed me beyond a polite nod. Now they paused before exiting, each giving me a respectful dip of the head. It was humbling. It was empowering. It was overdue. When the last board member left, I allowed myself a single, quiet breath, a breath that tasted like lavender and clarity. I had a company to rebuild, and I had only just begun. I didn't start with vengeance. Revenge, when guided by emotion, becomes sloppy and short-sighted. No, I began with efficiency, with dignity and logic, the way a seasoned grandmother handles a disorderly household. Only after order is restored can consequences flourish properly. The first step was restoring the operational integrity that Charles had quietly unraveled in recent years. Risky investments with irresponsible partners, bloated spending disguised as future development, silent deals with friends who contributed little and cost much. I pulled up the files and shook my head softly. "Charles," I murmured to myself, "you were so busy proving yourself powerful that you forgot to be prudent." By noon, I had initiated a full audit of all executive accounts, termination reviews for those who abused spending privileges, a restructuring plan that focused on stability rather than flash protections for the loyal employees whose voices had gone unheard. The board supported every decision without protest. They were hungry for leadership, real leadership, and I was ready to feed them. Next came the matter of Camille. Her name appeared across a dozen internal accounts: allowances, clothing stipends, entertainment budgets, family hosting expenses, even car payments filtered through discretionary funds. A breathtaking list for someone who had never worked a full day in her life. I clicked one button, then another, and another. Account access, revoked corporate apartment, reassigned monthly allowance, terminated family expense fund, closed permanently. Each click was not revenge. It was correction, a realignment of value and responsibility. When the changes took effect, a ripple of panic undoubtedly spread across Camille's meticulously curated world. She would try to call me. She would try to call the board. She would cry, shout, threaten, demand. But the only response she would receive was the one written clearly in the new HR policy. All future compensation will require documented employment, performance reviews, and active service to the company. If she wanted money now, she would have to earn it. And if she wanted a place in the company, she would have to work for it. I imagined her expression and allowed myself one small, graceful smile, a grandmother's smile, warm in shape, sharp in meaning. After lunch, I turned my attention to the divorce proceedings. While the courtroom debacle had been embarrassing for all involved, it also provided a clean legal opening. My lawyers, already aware of the board's decision, were waiting in a secure conference room. "Mrs. Whitmore," the lead attorney said, "word of your appointment has already reached Charles's counsel. I expected as much. And," he continued carefully, "they are unsettled." Unsettled, a polite word for chaotic with panic. "Prepare the following," I instructed. 1. Invoke the clause protecting personal assets gained through inheritance. My father's shares were mine alone, untouchable. 2. Void any spousal claims to corporate authority. As CEO and majority shareholder, Charles had no pathway to reclaim power. 3. Reinstate the amended prenup addendum he signed during the financial scare, the addendum he never thought would resurface. The attorneys exchanged looks of admiration. "You're very composed, Mrs. Whitmore," one remarked. I smoothed a page gently. "After raising a stepdaughter like Camille, gentlemen, there isn't much that rattles me." They laughed softly, but they knew I wasn't joking. By late afternoon, the ripple effects reached Charles. The emails, the revoked privileges, the changed access codes. His name, once spoken in these halls with reverence, now floated with confusion and discomfort. He had always thought the company needed him. He never realized it merely tolerated him. When his assistant attempted to enter his private office, the system flashed, "Access denied." He would see the new executive floor layout. He would see his discretionary car service suspended. He would see his shareholder influence reduced to minority status. He would hear that his daughter no longer had a corporate apartment. And finally, he would understand the cost of assuming that a quiet woman is a powerless one. Just before the end of the day, there was a commotion outside my office door. Raised voices, footsteps, a familiar, dramatic gasp. Then, the door burst open. Camille stood there, eyes red, cheeks blotched, hair slightly frizzed, coat askew, a far cry from the poised young woman who had sashayed through those corridors only that morning. "You!" she snapped, finger trembling as she pointed at me. Fix this. I placed my pen down deliberately. Good afternoon, Camille. Don't talk to me like everything is normal. I just found out I've been cut off. My apartment gone. The car gone. The allowance zero. This is illegal. No, I replied. It's appropriate. Her voice cracked. You can't do this. I am Charles Whitmore's daughter. I clasped my hands gently. And I said softly, am the CEO of this company. Her breath shuddered. Her lower lip trembled. You can't expect me to just work here, she whispered, horrified by the very concept. Yes, I said. Work or leave. That is your choice. But I don't know how to do anything. Her confession echoed in the office, tragic and honest. Then, I answered, now is an excellent time to learn. She stared at me, stunned, speechless, terrified, and in that moment I no longer saw a villain. I saw a girl who had been fed privilege instead of discipline, entitlement instead of responsibility, indulgence instead of truth. I felt a quiet pity, but not enough to undo the necessary consequences. She lowered her gaze. Why are you doing this to me? I'm not doing this to you, I corrected gently. I'm doing this for the company, for its future, and perhaps, Camille, for yours. She bit her lip, blinking hard. You called me a pig this morning, I reminded her softly, and I said nothing, because power speaks loudest in action, not words. Her eyes lifted slowly. And now, I finished, you will witness the difference. She opened her mouth, but nothing came out. Just silence. Humbling, settling silence. Finally, she turned and walked out, slower, smaller, no longer stomping. A child forced to face the adult world for the first time. Evening descended. The workday ended. Employees trickled out, unaware that a new era had begun at Whitmore Enterprises. I returned to the boardroom, the very room where they once dismissed me as an accessory to my husband's influence. The lights glowed warmly. The city skyline sparkled beyond the panoramic window. I walked to the head of the table, ran my fingers across the polished wood, sat in the CEO chair with complete ownership. This throne had never belonged to Charles. It had simply waited patiently for the woman who was meant to sit in it. I whispered into the quiet, "You called me a pig." The words floated, gentle but firm. But pigs grow fat. I straightened my shoulders, lifting my chin with the poise of a woman reborn. And queens, I looked at my reflection in the glass. They rise. I'm really glad you're here and that I could share my story with you. If you liked it, show me by liking the video and subscribing to my channel. Let's see how many of us there are. Write in the comments which city you're watching from and what time it is. I'm so curious to know where all you wonderful people are tuning in from. I share new life stories for you every single day. And now, 2 of my most popular stories will pop up on the screen so you can choose what to watch next.